My name is Julie Hocko, and I'm an engineer. I work in the energy industry in Calgary, Alberta. I'm also the mother of 2 children, aged 4 and 7, and I'm the founder of the STEM Moms Project. So you're probably wondering, what is the STEM Moms Project and how can someone be so passionate about this topic? I spent 3 years doing fly-in, fly-out, living and working in northern Alberta in oil sands camps. And it wasn't until I had children that I started to question, do I belong here? Do I belong as a woman in STEM? And what I found was the more and more of my peers that I spoke with, both from school and also who I worked with and within the industry, they all had the same feeling. It was this transition to parenthood that they found to be particularly difficult, and also that their organizations and their leaders were not prepared to deal with because it was male-dominated, and often the man did not have the life experience to help that woman navigate this transition of her life. Also, I heard so much about this mid-career leaky pipeline. I couldn't figure out why is no one talking about the motherhood aspect in the mid-career leaky pipeline. We hear about care work, and we hear about the demands at home, but specifically helping women transition at this very challenging point in their life, there was not a lot of content about it. And so 2 years ago, in February 2022, I put a post on LinkedIn and I said, this is something I'm very passionate about. I want to talk about it. Who wants to be part of this project, examining the unique barriers at the intersection of woman in STEM and working parent? And within 2 weeks, we had a Slack group set up. We had over 70 women admitted to that group who wanted to discuss it. And they would introduce themselves and they would say, I want to be part of this project because, and every single because was a challenge or a barrier that they themselves had encountered. And so we started to create a list. There was 40 barriers, and we decided, let's start talking about them. So within Slack, we were talking about each barrier and saying, how have you personally been affected by this specific topic? And I would take all of the summaries, and initially we thought, well, we'll just do diversity moments. We're gonna talk about these topics, we're gonna go back to our workplaces, and we're gonna create some awareness. But the project gained so much momentum that I've gone ahead and I've created a report, and that's what I'm going to share with you here today. So for our 15 topics we were able to get through in the 1 year period, there was 10 to 40 participants for every single topic, and eventually we transitioned from Slack and we started using Google Forms because Google Forms was anonymous, and these are very sensitive topics. Here are the 15 topics that we were able to get through in the 1 year period. And so I'll just point out a couple because I'm short on time here today. But number one is the burnout culture. So if you don't have children and you are in an industry where you have beyond all the time and available all the time, but you don't have any demand, it's probably already hard to keep up. Now you're adding in the childcare demand, it's going to be almost impossible. And so this was one of the hot topics that we came out the gate with, that everyone said, this is really relevant to me. I'm finding it so difficult to keep up in this type of an environment, in a corporate environment. Also the mental load. Anyone who is a parent or knows anything about parenting is going to be very familiar with this term, the mental load. It is remembering all of the things. It is remembering the 10 things that need to be in that backpack at the beginning of every day for each of your children, and where they need to be and when they need to be there and how they're going to get there, and every single bit of logistics that helps. So you put that on top of already being in a job with high stress, it's incredibly difficult. And I also want to draw your attention to career gaps. Career gaps is something that we talked about, and this is anyone that took a gap beyond that 12 to 18 month parental leave. These are people who actively decided, I'm going to step away for a period of time because I want to be with my family and be with my children. And the sad reality is the challenges to getting back into these STEM professions is incredibly difficult in a male-dominated space. If you step away and you want to come back in, you have confidence issues, you're trying to sell yourself, you're trying to convince people that you are still prioritizing careers, that you're still capable. And we had 36 participants within this topic, and the results were not favorable. So I've gone ahead and I've summarized the results from the 15 topics, and I've written a report on these. And number one recommendation, women in STEM support is very highly weighted in the early career areas. And so we know that we want more women in STEM, and we're trying to attract them. So university, early career. And then we also want women in leadership. And so there's a lot of supports for women in leadership, but in the middle, that middle support, there's not a lot of supports there for women in STEM groups. And so recommendation number one is if we could have more support to help women where they're at, to stay in the game, to stay in that pipeline so that we have this healthy pipeline to feed the leadership. Recommendation number 2 is focused on actions for allies. And so a big part of the project was women don't have a lot of time, and we don't want them spending their money to fix themselves. And so a big part of the STEM Moms project was how can other people make changes in their lives and their day-to-day to support the women in their life. So if you look at this mind map, it shows you all of the people that have the capability to be an ally for a woman who is also, a STEM woman who is also a parent. We had 12 actions that allies can implement, and I've categorized them into these 4 categories that you see before you. Number 1, safe environment. So these are things like psychological safety. As a leader, and even as a co-parent, are you creating that environment where the individual feels safe to come to you and ask for what they need without fear of negative repercussions? This is psychological safety. So maybe you're coming back from leave, maybe you're having real difficulty with your child and transitioning to daycare, and you need some sort of accommodations. Perhaps that asking to work from home more than what's allowed in your office. Are you going to be negatively impacted now because you asked for that? I hope that the answer is no, but often the answer is yes. Also, having managers who are not making assumptions. They're not making assumptions about your career path or what you want for your career. Instead, they're using open communication to ask you and to get your input. Leadership, we heard this earlier, talking about leaders who are empathetic, leaders who are vulnerable, making it okay for you to also be vulnerable and ask for what you need. Workplace cultures that have flexibility. So flexibility could be working part-time. It could be you work 7 to 3 and the rest of your coworkers work 9 to 5. It could be that you work from home X number of days a week. Also having workplaces that really support work-life integration. And mentorship. Often I think when we think of mentorship, it's this formalized, really structured program with a junior and a senior individual. Mentorship can be anybody. You can have peer mentorship. Anyone in the office can mentor a STEM mother. So moving on to the last set of recommendations, because I work in technology and innovation within the energy space, I couldn't help but think, what could we do that doesn't require any incentive for people that could kind of create this change over time? So I'm thinking long periods, like the next few decades. So 2 came to mind for a full career life cycle. I'm talking from the beginning of your career to the end. If we think about in the workplace, you have an end of year review every year where you check and say, did my performance support the company's goals? And I would ask you, are you having that same assessment for yourself, right? Did my performance this year support my life goals? Is this where I want to be? Is this role sustainable for me for the next 2 to 10 years? Does this support my career growth? And what I want to say here is that we're not conditioned to ask those things. We don't do those reviews every year. But what if we did those reviews, and then when you hit that hard time, when you had your kids, you felt like you were struggling, and you don't have time to do this assessment, it's like a muscle. You know how to do it because you've always been doing it. And the same thing with a work-life integration. Work-life integration within the project, the majority of the participants felt that they learned through trial and error. They didn't know about work-life integration until they had to. And so what if workplaces conditioned and supported their workers to always take advantage of altering their work to support their life? When you need it, you're going to be better able to prepare. And lastly, I want to identify that we need to elevate and spotlight and highlight 2 specific groups, the first being untitled leaders. A lot of people in STEM professions are technical because they love technical work. However, in society, we glorify the ladder climb, the management title. And so what we found in the project was that a lot of the participants felt like their careers hadn't progressed and they didn't feel like they were the success status because they didn't have a management title. But when in fact, if you have a career that gives you that work-life balance that you like and you feel like you're contributing every day and you're adding value, that is success. And if you can feel success like that, you're able to stay in the game and hopefully move on to leadership in future. And lastly, we don't talk about dual working parents. Only 19% of Canadian households have a stay-at-home parent, whether it's a stay-at-home wife or a stay-at-home dad. All we talk about is working mothers, and it's true. In society, we do the majority of the unpaid work. However, I will admit that within the project, the majority of the participants had spouses who did contribute to half of the childcare, right? And so we need to talk more about the benefits for dads to be involved in the home. They need to be equal in the home. They need to have these fulfilling and meaningful relationships with their children, right? And we need to value dads in the home so that we can value mothers in the workplace. So that was a lot in 10 minutes. I'm here for the rest of the morning. I'm happy to chat further. The full report is 30 pages. It's stemmomsproject.com. You can find it online. You can also follow STEM Moms Project on LinkedIn, or you can connect with me on LinkedIn, Julie Hacco. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Julie. And thanks to everybody else who's here today. Really amazing stuff. I'm a super early career young researcher who happens to be a woman. And so a lot of this is particularly of interest to me and is really cool to hear. So thank you all for being here today. We are just about 5 minutes behind schedule, so we're going to take a quick 10-minute break. And we'd love to have you all back here right at 9:30 when we're going to get started with our next panel. Thank you so much. Thanks.